was the blood pressure, if you remember. And we stated three main factors that would be affecting how the blood pressure is going to be changing. Remember, the type of blood pressure that we're using is going to be, to study the blood pressure, the state of the blood pressure is going to be the mean arterial pressure. And again, mean arterial pressure is going to give you an idea about the average blood pressure all the time during ventricular contraction as well as during ventricular relaxation. So it's the average pressure, considering that systolic blood pressure going to be only present for 1/3 of the time, and the diastolic pressure is going to be present for 2/3 of the time. So mean arterial pressure has three main factors, if you remember, that would be affecting it. Those are the cardiac output, the total peripheral resistance, and the blood volume. Those are the three main factors. Remember, any pressure is created by having flow faced by a resistance. And the force that got created between the two is going to be the pressure on the wall of the vessel here in this example. So if we're talking about blood pressure, it is the pressure applied on the wall of the vessels due to the presence of a blood flow within those vessels. Why do I need to have enough blood pressure? If you remember, I need to have enough blood pressure in order for me to push the blood through the arteries until it reaches the capillary beds for this fluid containing the oxygen and nutrients to pass between the cells. And my ability to get the fluid between the cells of a tissue is what we call a tissue perfusion. So in order for me to assure that I have enough tissue perfusion, the blood here needs to travel at a certain force, creating a specific blood pressure, which is on average 120 millimeter mercury during ventricular contraction and 80 millimeter mercury during ventricular relaxation. So this will create enough force for the fluid to leave the capillaries and to pass between the tissue cells, allowing the oxygen to reach the cells, allowing the nutrients to get delivered to those cells. Also, it will allow me to remove the waste. So this is why I will need to have enough blood pressure, because if I don't have enough blood pressure, I wouldn't have been able to deliver those nutrients, oxygen, and remove the waste from my organ tissues. So this is why I don't want to have low blood pressure. What is the problem with having high blood pressure? Why is it a problem? Why is it a problem to have a high blood pressure? Because remember, the blood pressure in my aorta here needs to be overcome by the force created by the heart. So the heart needs to overcome the blood pressure in the arteries, in the systemic arteries, in order for the new blood that gets ejected to travel through those arteries. So if I have a very high arterial blood pressure, what's going to happen? I will end up putting too much load on the cardiac muscle cells, which will end up causing hypertrophy and might cause heart failure if it has been persistent. So chronic hypertension can result in heart failure. So why this might happen? Because I am overloading the cardiac muscle cells to the extent that they wouldn't be able to keep up with this high blood pressure within the arteries. Another thing that high blood pressure gonna cause extra fluids that will be reaching my cells, and this can actually harm my capillaries, causing them to become fibrosed. So if the wall of the capillaries is formed of one row of epithelial cells, endothelium, so if I'm exposed to a high blood pressure, which I'm not expecting here, this will cause injury to the wall of those tiny capillaries. And this injury might heal by fibrosis, causing many problems at the end organs. Like, for example, person with hypertension might develop kidney problems because of the destruction of the capillary beds within the kidney, and so on. So we're looking here at why I don't have low blood pressure, why I don't want to have a high blood pressure either. So how your body going to be detecting and responding to changes in the blood pressure? So if I did get lots of salt from outside, so salt was going to be retaining water, increasing my blood volume, and as my blood volume goes up, my blood pressure will increase as well. So how my body will respond in this case? If a person lost some blood in an accident, so how would his body respond in this case? How would his body first detect that there is a low blood pressure or there is a high blood pressure, and accordingly respond to this change in the blood pressure to maintain the tissue perfusion, to maintain adequate delivery of the fluids containing the oxygen and nutrients? So looking here at two major control mechanisms that we do have in the body. Those are the neural regulation of the blood pressure and the hormonal regulation. So starting first with the neural controls, and those will rely on information detected by two types of receptors. First one is going to be the baroreceptors, and the baroreceptors are located in large vessels in special sites in large arteries, and they will be mainly detecting the degree of stretch applied to those arteries. So my main stimulus for the baroreceptors is going to be the artery stretch. If there is any increase or decrease in the stretch in the wall of the arteries, at this point, those baroreceptors are going to be firing signals to the autonomic nervous system for it to respond accordingly. So if you are a baroreceptor and you did sense that there is an increase in the degree of stretch, what this tells you about the state of your blood pressure? What do you think? I detected an increase, extra stretch applied to the wall of the arteries. More stretch. What do you think this means for me? High blood pressure, higher than normal, or lower than normal blood pressure? So again, what is the blood pressure? This is a force applied by the blood flow on the wall of the artery. So if I'm detecting extra stretch, this means that there is more pressure or lower pressure, greater pressure or lower pressure. higher pressure, definitely. So I have an increase in stretch. So what this tells me, that I have a high blood pressure. And what will I need to do? I'm sending out the signals to my nervous system, and the nervous system through the autonomic nervous system is going to be dealing with it by changing the diameter of the blood vessels. Remember, when I increase the diameter of the blood vessels, what did we call this? It's a vasodilation. And what do we call the reduction in the diameter of the blood vessel? It's vasoconstriction. So if I have high blood pressure, what do you think will I need to do to reduce the blood pressure back to normal? Would you dilate the vessel, or would you constrict the vessels, the arterioles? What do you think? If you are deciding right now, you did detect an increase in the blood pressure, would you be increasing the diameter of the vessel or decreasing the diameter of the vessel? Here, we're not looking at just one vessel, we're looking at all the vessels. All the vessels. This is a generalized control. So if I don't have enough pressure in the water hose, remember, what did you do? What did you do in order for the water to travel at a greater pressure? You squeezed the end of the hose, right? So you did perform what? You are reducing the diameter, you're constricting. This is if I do have low pressure. Here I'm telling you I have high blood pressure. So what would I need to do? Would I need to narrow or dilate? Would I need to constrict the vessels, or would I need to dilate the vessel? What do you think? To reduce the pressure. Dilate the vessels. So you see on here, I will be performing a vasodilation. You dilate the vessels. Why? Why? Because simply you need to reduce the pressure. And what did we learn? Remember, mean arterial pressure is going to be determined by what? It's going to be determined by blood flow, which is going to be the cardiac output, and the total peripheral resistance. So remember, when you constrict, what happens to the resistance? You're going to have greater resistance. And if I have higher resistance, what this means in terms of blood pressure is that you're going to have higher blood pressure. So if I constrict all the arterioles, what's going to happen? The flow is going to be faced by greater resistance. So this is going to increase my pressure. So here is the same concept that we're relying on. So I have high blood pressure. My body will respond by dilating the arterioles. And when I dilate the arterioles, I create less resistance. And as I reduce resistance, blood pressure gonna be reduced back to normal. What if I did detect a drop in the degree of stretch? What do you think? What do you think this means for me? This means that I have high or low blood pressure. Do I have high or low blood pressure? Low blood pressure, right? I have a reduction in the degree of stretch. This tells me that the blood here is not traveling at enough force, driving it forward. So the amount of pressure it applies on the wall has been reduced. So I am detecting a reduction in the degree of stretch. So this tells me I have low blood pressure. And how would you deal with low blood pressure? What do you think? What do you need to do? Would you dilate the vessel or would you constrict the vessels? If I have low pressure, remember, low pressure, what did I do? Compress. So you're gonna be performing a vasoconstriction. And as you vasoconstrict the arterioles, what's gonna happen? You increase resistance, and as resistance goes up, as you increase resistance, remember, your blood pressure goes up. So I would have increase in resistance, and as a result, you're gonna have a increase in the blood pressure back to normal. So what you're trying to do here, trying to maintain the blood pressure within the normal range. Don't want to have a drop in the blood pressure, don't want to have an increase in the blood pressure beyond normal range. What you're trying to do is to balance, to keep it in a normal range. Another type of receptors that will be present to monitor the state of my blood pressure is going to be the chemoreceptors. And the chemoreceptors, from their name, what they are detecting chemicals. If there is any chemical change that is taking place in the blood. Those are mainly concerned with two main things, which are the carbon dioxide levels and the blood pH, or in other words, the protons. So what does it mean to have an increase in those two for you in terms of blood pressure? If I do have any high carbon dioxide level, if I have high protons, or in other words, I have low pH, which is the same. Having too much acids, this will reduce my blood pH. What this means in terms of blood pressure? Does this mean I have high blood pressure or low blood pressure? What do you think? And how would you explain it? High carbon dioxide, high protons. This means what? In terms of blood pressure, high or low blood pressure? So again, can you remind me, why do I need to have enough blood pressure to allow something called tissue perfusion, right? So it allows my ability to get the oxygen fluids delivered to my tissues. So what is meant by having high carbon dioxide, having high acids? This means what for me? Am I able to get rid of the carbon dioxide if it's high? No. Am I able to get rid of the acids that are resulting from the metabolic reactions? No. So you didn't deliver enough blood to those organs which are responsible to clear out those wastes. So if you didn't deliver enough blood to those organs, this means what for me? This means I have a low perfusion. And if I have low perfusion, this means in terms of blood pressure, I have high or low blood pressure. I have a low blood pressure. And having a low blood pressure means what? Means I will need to respond by performing which one? Dilation of the arterioles or constriction of the arterioles? What do you think? If you have low blood pressure, would you like to squeeze the vessels for the blood to move faster? Or would you dilate all the arterioles? What do you think? You constrict. You will be performing constriction. So again, what are the two neural controls that we do have? We rely on two types of receptors. Those are the baroreceptors, which are detecting the degree of stretch to the wall of the arteries. And accordingly, they will decide whether you do have an increase or decrease in the blood pressure. Another type of receptors that we've got is those going to be the chemoreceptors, which are mainly concerned by monitoring the carbon dioxide levels and the blood pH. And accordingly, they will send out the signals to the nervous system that will be either performing a vasoconstriction or a vasodilation to regulate your blood pressure by changing the resistance facing the blood flow. Moving on to another type of generalized blood pressure regulation and control. This is going to be my hormonal controls. And hormonal controls are going to be driven by epinephrine and norepinephrine. Those two hormones, if you remember, those are released from the adrenal medulla of the adrenal gland. And if you remember back from the autonomic nervous system, so this part of the adrenal gland, the adrenal medulla of the gland, was innervated by the sympathetic nervous system. And remember, sympathetic nervous system was responsible to increase my blood pressure, increase my heart rate. So here, what do you think is going to be the effect of the epinephrine and norepinephrine on your blood vessels? Would they be dilating your blood vessels if you want to increase the blood pressure, or would you like to constrict the blood vessels? What do you think is going to be the effect on here? If you want to increase the blood pressure, increase blood pressure, would you like to constrict or to dilate your arterioles? Constrict. So what will be the effect of the epinephrine and norepinephrine on my arterioles? Again, vasoconstriction. Who do you think is the organ that hates low blood pressure? If you're choosing between the body organs, who is the organ that will hate low blood pressure and is going to be trying to increase the blood pressure? Kidneys? Any other guess? Kidney? Why the kidney is going to hate having a low blood pressure? As remember, what is the function of the kidney? Is to filter the blood coming in. So if there is no enough blood coming in the kidney, would the kidney be able to function? Would it do anything? No. So who hates low blood pressure and is going to be trying its best to increase it to normal? It's going to be your kidneys. Yes, definitely. Brain going to need continuous supply of blood. But supply of blood can be driven by lower blood pressure. But who gonna suffer if he didn't get blood at enough pressure? Is gonna be the kidney. And again, why? Because This pressure is what drives the blood to be filtered. All right? This is what's going to be driving the blood to get filtered in the kidney. So if I have a drop in the blood pressure, my kidney will simply not going to be able to filter the toxins and the waste from the blood. Who, on the other hand, hates high blood pressure? If you're picking just one single organ, and it's going to be trying to increase it, it's going to be trying to decrease it. Who hates high blood pressure? What do you think? Any guesses? Who hates high blood pressure? Heart. Why is a heart? Remember, the heart needs to pump the blood against the pressure in the arteries. So as I increase the pressure within my arteries, what's going to happen? This will put more load on the heart for it to be able to eject the blood out. So the heart hates high blood pressure, and the kidney hates low blood pressure. So what do you think? Would the kidney be able to, if I told you that a hormone is called atrial natriuretic peptide, just from the name, can you tell me whether it's going to be performing a vasoconstriction or a vasodilation? Knowing that the heart hates high blood pressure and the kidney hates low blood pressure, and the hormone name is atrial natriuretic peptide, what can you come up with? What can you guess in here? Although this is the first time that you hear about this hormone. Will it dilate or constrict? Break down the word, take a minute to think. It's not a guessing question. You can simply know the answer by thinking the same way that we have been doing to get a correct answer from the available pieces of information. What do you think? I'm called atrial. So atrial means what? Means I am released from where? From the heart? From the atrium of the heart, right? So, and the heart will hate what? High blood pressure. So what do you think is going to be the action of the hormone called atrial natriuretic peptide? Will it to increase the blood pressure or to reduce the blood pressure? If we already know that the heart hates high blood pressure, so can you guess what's going to be the atrial natriuretic peptide going to be trying to do? It's going to be trying to reduce the blood pressure, and I'm trying to reduce the blood pressure. How? Would I dilate the arterioles or would I constrict the arterioles? What do you think? I wanna decrease blood pressure, so what's gonna be the effect of the atrial natriuretic peptide? It's gonna be performing a vasodilation. It's gonna be dilating the arterioles. If I told you that the kidney here is releasing a hormone called renin, and renin is going to be responsible to activate a hormone called the angiotensin angiotensinogen first into angiotensin 1 that gets converted later on into angiotensin 2. So if you see here, so the production of renin from the kidney resulted in the formation of angiotensin 2. So what do you think is going to be the effect of the angiotensin 2 on my arteries? Will it dilate my arteries or will it constrict my arteries? Kidney hates low blood pressure. So the hormone that gets released from the kidney is going to be trying to do what to the blood pressure? Is going to be trying to increase the blood pressure back to normal. So how would I increase the blood pressure? By constricting or dilating my arterioles by vasoconstriction. I will constrict the arterioles, and as I constrict the arterioles, what's going to happen again to my mean arterial pressure? Mean arterial pressure here. When you increase resistance, it will increase. So total peripheral resistance increases as you constrict the arterioles, and as a result, you're going to be increasing the blood pressure. All right, so another hormone that we're looking at today is going to be released from part of the brain that we call the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is going to be releasing this hormone down to be accumulated within the posterior part of the pituitary gland. This hormone that we're gonna be producing from the hypothalamus that gets stored and released from the posterior pituitary gland is called antidiuretic hormone. So from the name on here, antidiuretic hormone, or another name is gonna be vasopressin. What do you think is going to be the actions here of the ADH, or another name for it is vasopressin? In terms of blood pressure, what's going to be the effect on the blood pressure? Will it increase or decrease the blood pressure? From just looking at the name, antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin. Can you guess what's going to be the effect on the blood pressure? What anti means? Anti means it prevents. So I'm a hormone that prevents diuresis. What's diuresis? Diuresis means loss of water in urine. So this is a hormone that prevents the loss of water in the urine. So what's going to happen to this water that you're not losing out in the urine? So where do you get the urine from again? It's coming from the blood. So if the blood did not waste this fluid out in the urine, so what's going to happen? It's going to remain in the blood. So if this fluid is not wasted in the urine, it's going to remain in the blood as part of the blood. So what happens if I have prevented the loss of water in the urine to my blood volume? What's going to happen to your blood volume if you're not losing the water out in the urine? What's going to happen to your blood volume? Do you have a higher or lower blood volume? Increase. So I'm taking water, but I'm not losing it out in the urine. So what's going to happen? I will be retaining the water. And as a result, I will have an increase in my blood volume. And what do you think is going to be the effect here on my blood pressure? Having higher blood volume. If you have a container that holds 5 gallons and another container that holds 1 gallon, which one are going to apply more pressure if you put both of the containers on a table? Which one are going to be applying more pressure? The one with greater volume or the one with lesser volume? The one with greater volume, definitely. So if I have an increase in my blood volume, how is this going to be reflected on my blood pressure? An increase in my blood pressure. And from the other name of the hormone, vasopressin. So vaso means blood vessel, pressin, I'm putting pressure. In other words, I'm performing vasoconstriction. And this is another mechanism by which ADH is going to be increasing your blood pressure. ADH is not only retaining the water, it's also going to be constricting the vessels, increasing the total peripheral resistance, resulting in further increase in your blood pressure. So a quick recap of what we've just mentioned. Your autonomic nervous system is going to be controlling and maintaining a normal blood pressure, relying on two major types of receptors. First ones are my baroreceptors, which are detecting the degree of stretch. If I have an increase in the degree of stretch, this tells me that I have an increase in the blood pressure. If I have a reduction in the degree of stretch, this tells me that I have a lower blood pressure. So how do you think I will be responding in both cases? Your autonomic nervous system is going to be either dilating or constricting the arterioles, and this will be changing the total peripheral resistance. Remember, if I have high blood pressure, I will be performing vasodilation, and if I have lower blood pressure, the arteries need to constrict to squeeze this blood to reach the target organs. The other type of receptors that we've seen was the chemoreceptors. And from the name here, chemoreceptors are going to be detecting changes in the blood chemistry. And two of the most important chemicals here that we're focusing on are going to be the carbon dioxide and the proton or pH levels. So if I have an increase in the carbon dioxide levels, I have an increase in the protons. This means I do not deliver enough blood to my organs. In other words, I have a low blood pressure. So how would I respond to this low blood pressure? I will be constricting again my arterioles in order to increase it back to normal and keep the blood moving towards the organs. We've seen different hormones that would be also affecting the blood pressure. We've seen 3 hormones that are increasing the blood pressure, and those are going to be the norepinephrine, the angiotensin II, and the antidiuretic hormone. All those are going to be performing, causing an increase in the blood pressure by different means. The common mean by which all of them going to be increasing the blood pressure is by performing constriction of the arterioles, performing a vasoconstriction. One hormone that was released from the heart that tends to dilate the vessels. Also, it acts by different means that we're going to be discussing in details in the next chapters. This is going to be my atrial natriuretic peptide. So one of its means to reduce the blood pressure is by enhancing the dilation of the arterioles, causing a decrease in the total peripheral resistance, and so a drop in the blood pressure to normal in case of an increase in the blood pressure. So again, why do I need tissue perfusion? Why do I need to have normal delivery of the blood to the tissues? First, to guarantee delivery of oxygen and nutrients, to allow the removal of waste, to allow the gas exchange to take place in the lungs, also to allow the absorption of the nutrients from the digestive tract, and to allow the filtration of the blood and the urine formation in the kidneys. I have normal blood pressure, but let's say this organ on here, organ X, is not receiving enough blood. What would you like to do? You have a normal blood pressure, but this specific organ is not receiving the amount of blood that it needs. What do you think you need to do at this point? I'll give you two options. Increase the blood pressure by constricting all arterioles, or in other words, increasing the total peripheral resistance. This is A. B, I will be performing a vasodilation of all arterioles in the body. C, I will be performing vasoconstriction of the local artery that delivers the blood to organ X, or I will be performing a vasodilation of the local artery that drives the blood to organ X. Which one would you pick? You have a normal blood pressure, but there is no enough blood going to organ X. What would you like to do? You got C so far. What do you think? You want to constrict here. I see two more C's. You want to constrict this artery. What else? Any other idea? C again. All right, so what's going to happen if you constrict this vessel? If I constricted this vessel, what is your problem? Your problem is that you're not getting enough blood. So I have reduction in my tissue perfusion. So if I constricted the vessel, would I be delivering more or less blood to this organ? What do you think? If I constricted this vessel, becomes narrowed, would you be delivering more or less blood? Less blood. So is this what you want? What do you think? No. So I don't want to mess the blood pressure all over the body. I don't want to constrict the arteriole, go into the specific size where I'm suffering of low tissue perfusion, so I cannot constrict this vessel because I would be getting less blood. So the only good thing I can do for this organ is actually to dilate the vessel instead of constricting the vessel to allow more blood to get delivered on here. So what is the difference on here? So I did have lower pressure in this artery. This is at this specific site. How did I respond? Having this lower blood pressure, I performed not a constriction, but a vasodilation. And this is exactly the opposite of what we've just mentioned. So you see on here, reduction of blood pressure. How did I respond? I was performing vasoconstriction. But this is the case if you're dealing with a generalized problem. I have a drop in the blood pressure, in the mean arterial pressure in all the arteries in the body. But here, I have a localized problem. So having a localized problem, if I constricted this vessel, it's going to be the organ here is going to be receiving much less blood. And it actually is suffering from a reduction in the tissue perfusion. So in order for you to regulate the amount of tissue perfusion, you're going to rely on a totally different regulatory system, which is the auto regulation. Regardless of the blood pressure outside, I have another regulatory system located at the organ level. And we have two systems actually. We have the metabolic and the myogenic. For the metabolic, I will be responding to decline in the oxygen levels. I will be responding to increase in protons, which means a drop in the pH, potassium, adenosine, prostaglandins, and other inflammatory chemicals, as well as nitric oxide. So why those? So what is meant for me to have a drop in the oxygen? What is meant for me to have high potassium, high adenosine? What this means for me in terms of blood pressure? Do I have a high or low blood pressure? Or I mean tissue perfusion? I have low oxygen. I have high potassium adenosine. I have low blood pressure. So I can understand that, yeah, you have low oxygen. This means you have low blood pressure. But what is the significance of having high potassium or low pH? What this means for you? This means an adenosine. This means that I have cell death. So remember, what was the major cation inside the cells? Inside your cells, you have more potassium. So if the cells are destroyed, what's going to happen to this potassium that was located on the inside? It's going to be released out. And as a result, what's going to happen? It's going to increase in the vessels. So having an increase in the potassium levels, adenosine, which are intracellular chemicals. If you have them increasing outside of the cells, this means that those cells are dying and they are not getting enough tissue perfusion. So this is translated into low pressure. So how would you respond at the organ level? Here we're looking at the same organ X on here. Would you like me to constrict or dilate this vessel? Going to organ X, if organ X is gonna be getting low tissue perfusion, how would you respond again? Dilate or constrict the vessel? You dilate to get more blood delivered to the organ. If you constricted this vessel, what's gonna happen? You're not gonna be increasing the pressure, you're gonna make it more difficult for the blood to get in. Here we're looking at a localized issue, not a generalized issue. The other type of autoregulation is going to be relying on detecting the degree of stretch by the smooth muscle cells located in the wall of the arteries. So again, we're still supplying organ X, and this is the local blood vessel. So if the smooth muscle cells are detecting an increase in the degree of stretch, so more stretch is applied to those muscles, this means that I have low or high supply of blood to this organ. If I have more stretch, this means more blood is coming in, right? Causing more stretch of the vessels. So this means I would like to do what? Constriction or dilation of the vessel to reduce the amount of blood reaching this organ, this specific organ. What do you think? Would you like to constrict or to dilate? You want to constrict, exactly. So if I have passive stretch, how would I respond? I would be constricting the vessel. And this is the response at a localized level. So whenever I have an increase in the intravascular pressure, this promotes the increase in tone and the vasoconstriction. How about if I did have a reduced stretch applied to the smooth muscles of those vessels? So this means I have high or low supply to this organ, blood supply to this organ. I have less stretch, this means less blood is coming in. And if I have less blood coming in, it means I need to increase the blood going to this organ. So how would you think I would be increasing the supply to this organ? Would you like to constrict or to dilate the vessel? You're gonna need to dilate the vessel. So vasodilation. So what we're looking at in here, those are the two major mechanisms of autoregulation, which I will maintain the tissue perfusion at the organ level. I'm not here looking at the regulation of the whole blood pressure. I'm regulating the blood supply at the organ level. This is a localized regulation rather than a generalized regulation. So again, we've got two mechanisms of autoregulation. We've got the metabolic and we've got the myogenic, it's not drawing, myogenic regulation. So looking here at this diagram showing the different factors that will affect the regulation of the blood pressure. First, the metabolic controls. Remember, a drop in the pH means I have higher protons, more acids that will be accumulated. A drop in the oxygen level means what? Means I have less supply. And if I have less supply, I will need to do what to the vessel? I need to dilate the vessel. What if I have an increase in the carbon dioxide levels, potassium, prostaglandins, adenosine, nitric oxide? Increase in all those means for me, I have getting less blood than what I need. And remember, potassium is an intracellular, adenosine is intracellular, so I shouldn't see those out in the blood. So an increase in their levels means that I have self-destruction. So why would I have self-destruction? Simply because I didn't supply enough oxygen, enough nutrients to those cells for them to survive. So those, when they are high, means I have less supply than what I need. So what will I do to the vessel carrying the blood to this organ? I will need them to dilate. Myogenic control. Myogenic control, if I have an increase in the degree of stretch. This means for me, I'm getting more than what I need, passive stretch. So how would I respond? I will constrict the vessel. What if I have a reduction in the degree of stretch? So I'm expecting a certain degree of stretch, but I'm getting less stretch than what I'm used to. So this means for me, I'm getting less than what I need, and I would need to dilate the vessel in order for me to get enough blood supply to this organ. All those are part of the intrinsic mechanism or the auto-regulation. External or extrinsic mechanisms, those are mainly focusing on the regulation of the blood pressure in all arteries all over the body. We rely on two main regulatory mechanisms. Those are the neural control and the hormonal controls. So sympathetic nervous system is going to be constricting the vessels to ensure the increase of the blood pressure in case of fight or flight, as you know. This is going to be carried on according to the innervation and the signals it receives from the chemoreceptors and the baroreceptors. Hormonal control, remember, epinephrine, norepinephrine, angiotensin II, and antidiuretic hormone, all of them going to be increasing the blood pressure by performing a vasoconstriction compared to the atrial natriuretic peptide, which is released from the heart. Remember, heart is willing to reduce the afterload. So it's going to be trying to reduce the blood pressure in the arteries. So the heart here is going to be trying to reduce the blood pressure by releasing the atrial natriuretic peptide that induces the dilation of the vessels, and this is going to cause a drop in the pressure. If you notice on here, epinephrine and norepinephrine are going to be performing both constriction and dilation of the arteries according to the type of receptors they would be affecting. So something that you need to remember is that you don't want to constrict or to dilate all the blood vessels if you are willing to shift the blood flow from one organ to the other. So in case of fight or flight, I want the blood to be shifted towards my skeletal muscles, for example, away from my gastrointestinal tract. So I want to do what in here? Sympathetic nervous system is willing to constrict the blood vessels, supplying the blood to the gastrointestinal tract, in the same time to dilate those arterioles carrying the blood towards my skeletal muscles. So how would I be performing two opposing actions here? By simply having two different receptors. So in case of activation of sympathetic nervous system, stimulation of the adrenal medulla of the adrenal gland, what's going to happen? Epinephrine and norepinephrine going to get released, and the epinephrine and norepinephrine going to be performing both constriction and dilation according to which organ they are affecting. All right, so you don't want to dilate the blood vessels going to the gastrointestinal tract as well as the ones going to your skeletal muscles. You want to dilate only the ones in the skeletal muscles and to constrict the ones going to your gastrointestinal tract for the blood to shift from your gastrointestinal tract towards your skeletal muscles. All right, so again, what allowed the epinephrine and norepinephrine to have two opposing effects on the different organs is going to be determined. This is going to be determined according to the type of receptor that is present on those organ blood vessels. All right, so for the first in-class activity for today, please answer this question on here. How do we move more blood to skeletal muscles when needed to exercise? Do we open the precapillary sphincters in the skeletal muscles? Do we close the precapillary sphincters in less important tissues? Or are we going to be doing both or none of the above? What do you think? Which one do you think you're going to be doing in order to conduct more blood to your skeletal muscles? Do you remember what are the precapillary sphincters first? Those are the sphincters that were located at the base of my true capillaries, regulating the blood flow to my true capillaries. Those are the ones that will be performing the actual exchange in the capillary beds. So if I wanted to get more blood delivered to my skeletal muscles, what would I do for those precapillary sphincters in the skeletal muscles? Would you like them to dilate or to constrict? What do you think? Would you like them to dilate or to constrict? To dilate. Why to dilate? To allow the blood to move into the true capillaries. And how about the gastrointestinal tract, for example? If I'm exercising, would you like me to open and dilate the precapillary sphincters in the gastrointestinal tract, allowing blood to flow to supply the stomach? No. So what you're gonna do for the precapillary sphincters in the capillary beds of the gastrointestinal tract, for example, it's gonna be to constrict. So you're gonna be doing two things actually in order to shift the blood towards your skeletal muscles. You're going to be opening the precapillary sphincters in the skeletal muscles, but at the same time, you're going to be closing the precapillary sphincters of the less important tissues. All right, so the good answer here is all of you that mentioned is going to be C, which is both.